So as I mentioned at the beginning of Mass, this is the last Mass with our students this weekend. Today, here we are, and this is just so. What it is the season of goodbyes, and this is one of those situations. I mean, it seems like we just had the season of greetings. Like it seems like we just had the season of hellos, and so for so many of our students, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm already saying goodbye. And I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about the greetings and the goodbyes, right? The hellos and those so longs, where it's just like, I think sometimes we can miss them. Not the greetings. The hellos, they're kind of obvious. We meet a person for the first time. It's kind of significant. But we can miss when we say goodbye to someone for the last time. Does that make sense? Just that when it comes to greetings and goodbyes, the first one is the first greeting. Very obvious. This is clearly we've never met before. But the last goodbye, we can often miss. I was going online and I saw this. He's kind of a popular divorce attorney online, and he was talking about saying goodbye to his kids, saying goodbye to anyone you love. And he said, you know, you never know which goodbye is the last goodbye. You never know when. So he said, I have this exercise. I'll do this where I embrace my kids. I hug my kids before I say goodbye to them. And as I'm hugging them, I imagine that they've already died. I imagine that they've died, and this is the last hug that I'll ever have with them. This is the last time I will ever get to say goodbye to them. He says, it's so powerful. He said, give me a new perspective on every goodbye, particularly on the next goodbye, right? So we are in this series talking about, it's not just about the first confession or the first communion, it's about the next confession, about the next communion, the next time we have with the Lord. And this today is about the next goodbye. Here's something, it's interesting, sometimes the first greeting and the last goodbye are the same thing. You know, we just meet someone and say goodbye for the first time and the last time. And that's it. And sometimes it's interesting. Sometimes if you're ever in a situation where you know it, where you meet someone for the first time and you say goodbye for the first time, but you also know, no, I'm saying goodbye for the last time. The same moment, the same hello is that last goodbye. Last fall, there was a young man that I was introduced to. He's 15 years old, a really good kid named Eli. And Eli's from Kentucky, and he has his mom and dad and his little older sister, Hadley. But Eli had gotten sick. He had some health issues his whole life, but he had recently been battling cancer. And so when I was contacted, they said he had just a couple weeks maybe to live. And so Eli had a Make-A-Wish, and his Make-A-Wish was that I would come down to Kentucky. And I told that to my brother-in-law, and he said, are you serious? Like, LeBron was not available? Like, why would he choose you? And I'm like, I know. I said he was a good kid. I didn't say he was a smart kid. But he was a good and a smart kid. And it was such a gift. It was a massive gift to be able to go down to Lexington and just be there with him and with his family and just see this man of faith, a 15-year-old who had so much faith. He and to have a family that loved him so much. His mom and his dad and his sister. He had so much faith. He was praying that he would beat cancer. He was praying that he'd be able to grow old. He's praying that he could be a priest one day. Also, he wanted to be a professional bowler, but he said, I can do both. I can be a priest and a professional bowler. I'm like, yeah, I know. I wanted to be a priest and Batman. So, you can bring it all. You live the best of both worlds. But we talked about his diagnosis. We talked about so many things. Talked about decorating. He loved how his mom had decorated for every single season. And this was kind of before Halloween. And so the whole house was decorated for Halloween. And just the recognition of every time he just brought up life. Whether that was his friends at school, at his Catholic high school, or his family, or just what it was to pray. He prayed the rosary every day. He just had this smile on his face. He had been asked to homecoming earlier, a couple weeks before this, and he had a big smile on his face about that one. But he was just someone who he knew the value of that moment. And so because he knew the value of that moment, that has that perspective of this is, my time is limited. Had just incredible perspective. It was this greeting, it was this goodbye. And it was his perspective. The word perspective, I think, is fascinating. The etymology of perspective literally means to see through. That if you have perspective, It's how you see through it. It's either our perspective helps us see things clearly, or our perspective kind of muddies things. It doesn't clarify things. It makes them harder to see. I remember years ago, I read the foreword of a book. Mark Hart had written the foreword in this book, and he talked about the story of Michelangelo, right? The artist. And how Michelangelo, when he carved the statue of David, it was this massive block of marble that people had discarded. So at one point, some artist had already started working on it and discarded it because they said it was too flawed. And then Michelangelo finds this massive cut piece of marble, and he carved the statue of David out of it. And people were marveled at this, like, how in the world could he possibly have carved this incredible statue out of this flawed piece of marble? And apparently Michelangelo said something like this. He said, "I saw the angel in the marble, and then I carved until I set him free." That notion that he had perspective, that he could see things clearly. And every one of us, we do, right? We have a perspective on life, especially right now, our students. And this is week going into this week, where all of the things, and think about for you, but think about for them, all of the things that demand their attention, all the things that demand your attention, all there for them, their finals, their papers, their projects, all for you, all just the stuff you have to get done today, the stuff you have to get done throughout the course of this week. I think for many of us, a lot of times, they're not merely the task of the moment. It's not really just the stuff we have to do, because that's fine. But for some of us, they fall into one perspective. One perspective is they don't mean it. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to phone it in. I'm just going to phone it in because it doesn't matter. I'm not going to try because it doesn't matter. I'm not going to be worried about it because it doesn't matter. Or we're like, oh my gosh, this is a make or break thing for my life. If I don't get this, I'm toast. Or I have to have this, or else something massively disastrous is going to happen in my life. And it's so interesting that our perspectives either, this doesn't matter, I'm not going to try. Our hearts quickly become troubled because of our perspective. And yet in the gospel today, what's Jesus say? In the gospel today, his first words, he says, "Do not let your hearts be troubled." And here's the question, how can he say this? A bigger question is, how can we possibly imagine doing? Can you imagine actually putting into practice what Jesus said, "Do not let your hearts be troubled"? How in the world would we do this? I think we do it by having the one thing that every Christian needs, but the one thing that only very few Christians actually have. Like, honestly, when it comes to putting Jesus' words into practice, do not let your hearts be troubled, we do it by having the one thing every single Christian needs, but very few of us have. It's so long I've been convicted by this reality that the only way forward for our students, that before they leave, that I just want to say, like, what's one last thing I want to communicate to them before they leave, before they go, before the next goodbye, is perspective. And not just any perspective, but this thing called eternal perspective. Eternal perspective. Here's the thing. This is the one thing that every single Christian needs, but very few of us actually have. Because without it, we'll never know either the meaning of life or the meaning of this moment. Without eternal perspective, we'll possibly waste our entire lives on what does not ultimately matter. And we'll definitely miss out on what actually does matter. Without eternal perspective, our hearts will never find rest. Without eternal perspective, our hearts will be troubled. Years ago, there was this woman named St. Teresa of Avila. St. Teresa of Avila, she lived in a very difficult time, even though she was a nun, not just difficult socially, not just difficult in the church, but even difficult in her own life. So even though she was a nun, she even describes this in her book about herself. She says for 20 years, she lived the life of a lukewarm nun. So she said for 20 years, she was a nun, and she wasted 2 decades of being a bride of Christ because she was very popular, she was very charming, she was very beautiful, she was very intelligent, and there was this kind of parlor area in the monastery where she was, in the convent that she was, and that people would come by and stop by, and she just, again, was so charming, so beautiful, so fun to be with, so intelligent. She would spend all of her time in the parlor, and she said she found herself being so divided because she was always anxious. When she was in the parlor, she's like, I should probably be praying. When she was praying, she's like, I'd rather be out there talking to people. And she's torn back and forth, and this is probably where many of us are. When it comes to our lives, our perspective is, okay, I'm doing this one thing, I should be doing something else. If I'm doing something else, I should be doing that other thing. She had this massive conviction and ultimately this massive conversion where she began to see her life with an eternal perspective. And God used her to transform not only her religious community and her culture. He literally used her to transform the church. And St. Teresa of Avila had this saying. She just said, "Do not be troubled." She said this, "Let nothing disturb you. Let nothing frighten you. All things are passing. God never changes." After she had this eternal perspective, there's that, okay, listen, there are so many things I get worked up about, and this is us. There are so many things we can get worked up about. Or we could just say, let nothing disturb you. Let nothing frighten you. All things are passing. God never changes. Do not let your hearts be troubled. That's what Jesus says, right? Let nothing disturb you. Let nothing frighten you. Do not let your hearts be troubled. How do we do this? Jesus tells us in the gospel today. Jesus actually tells us how we can have an eternal perspective, how we can let our hearts not be troubled. He says two things. Number one, he says, have faith in God, have faith in me. And secondly, he says, in my Father's house, there are many dwelling places. This is so key for all of us. To have this eternal perspective, the thing that every Christian needs, but so few of us have, we have to realize, have faith in God, have faith also in Jesus. We have to realize this, we're not alone. And we're not on our own. If we understand the character of God, that God is good, he is our good Father, and he loves us. So we know this. We know. Have faith in God. Have faith in Jesus. We know we're not alone. And the second thing is, he says, in my Father's house there are many dwelling places. Basically, Jesus is saying, there is more to this life than just this life. He reminds us of our ultimate destiny. So those two things, right? Remembering the character of God and our ultimate destiny gives us an eternal perspective. This conviction that there is more to this life than just this life. The conviction that this is not home. Yes, everything we do in this life matters, but this is not home. And if it's not home, it has to change how we live. I mean, no one ever changes the oil on a rental car. No one ever goes to a hotel room and buys new furniture for that hotel room. I mean, no one ever does this. Why? Because this is not my car. This is not my home. And yet we get so worked up, we get so troubled by things that we know, if we stop for a moment, we know that they're passing. Now, that doesn't mean that's not an invitation to not do anything in this world. In fact, we know this. We know that those who have believed in heaven, those who believed in the afterlife, those who believe that there's more to this life than just this life, have done more for this world than anyone else. In fact, C.S. Lewis says this. Here's the long quote. C.S. Lewis says, if you read history, you find that the Christians who did most for this present world were the ones who thought most about the next world. The apostles themselves, who set foot the conversion of the Roman Empire, the great men who built up the Middle Ages, the English evangelicals who abolished the slave trade, they all left their mark on earth precisely because their minds were occupied with heaven. He went on to say, he said, it's since Christians have largely ceased to think of the other world that they become so ineffective in this world. Aim at heaven and you'll get earth thrown in. Aim at earth and you'll get neither. So we realize that this is not our home. That doesn't say that, our motto is life is short. No, it means that this life leads to something else. Everything we do matters. There's this man, he's a preacher, his name is Randy Alcorn. And Randy Alcorn said it like this. He said, with eternity in view, like that eternal perspective, nearly every honest activity, whether building a shed or driving a bus or pruning trees or changing diapers or caring for a patient, can be an investment in God's kingdom. I remember hearing a story a long time ago, but I was reminded of it recently, of a man who came upon a group of people who were building a cathedral. This massive building. You see them all like busy, milling about and doing their work. And at one point he came upon this one individual who was working with this massive beam that was going to be in the rafters. And on these beams that were going to be in the rafters, he was carving this intricate pattern of birds. And I looked at the man and he's like, this is incredible. But he's taking all of this time to carve these birds into beams that no one will see. And so at one point he just had to ask the man, he said, why would you spend all of this time carving these birds, this beautiful art, into beams that no one will see? And the man looked up at him from his work and he says, yes, people on the earth, people on the ground looking up might not see, but God sees. And so it matters. This is what it is to have an eternal perspective, to live with this question that just says, when I'm face to face with Jesus, what will I be glad that I chose to do today? At the end of my life, when I'm face to face with Jesus, what will I be glad that I chose to do today? That's what it is to live with an eternal perspective. Of course, I've been working on this. I've been praying with this for a long, long time. And I'm like, man, why do I still get worked up? Like, why do I still get anxious? Still get stressed? I still get all just like rattled. And every time I do, in order to kind of re-solidify this eternal perspective, there's a quote that comes to my mind. And it's a quote by the same Saint Teresa of Avila. And the quote is this. Again, whenever I just find myself getting so stressed and my heart is troubled, there's this quote, this question from Saint Teresa of Avila. And she asked this question, and that's just simply this. What is this in light of eternity? What is this in light of eternity? Jesus says, do not let your hearts be troubled by anything. Because you know these two things, right? You know God's character. You know God is good. And secondly, you know that there's more to this life than just this life. You know that Jesus is the way and the truth and the life. So this, whatever this is, what is this in light of eternity? And some things in light of eternity are less meaningful in light of eternity, like insults, being misunderstood, failures, other people's opinion. In light of eternity, don't matter a lot. Resentment, aging, our appearance, worries. What is this in light of eternity? Even death. What is this in light of eternity? And other things are more meaningful in light of eternity. What is joy in light of eternity? Matters even more. Real laughter. What is that in light of eternity? Time, family, prayer, honest work, speaking the truth. What is this in light of eternity? It matters even more. Doing the difficult right thing, offering grace, suffering. What is this in light of eternity? You know, St. Paul even says that about suffering. He says, this momentary light affliction is nothing compared to the eternal weight of glory that is to be revealed in us. So in light of eternity, some things mean less and some things mean more. So years ago, there was one of my brother priests in the diocese here in Duluth. He had gone down to the Twin Cities to a Vikings game. And it turned out they won, which is a miracle in itself. Anyways, they won. It was a great game, apparently. He went with a bunch of people, but on his way home, he was driving back by himself. And he was telling me about this. He said that on my way home, he said, I just kept calling people. And I just kept calling people because I just wanted to, I was so pumped. I was so excited. I was so joyful. I wanted to just talk with people on the phone and share that joy. And he had this line. He said, because joy shared is joy multiplied. And he said, and then also said, and grief shared is grief divided. And I think something is true about the eternal perspective. Our eternal perspective amplifies the great things on this earth. Where we look at this and say, man, all this and more. And an eternal perspective divides grief. Where we realize, okay, this is not all there is. I'm not alone. The eternal perspective divides grief. You know, as Christians, we still grieve. Like, as Christians, we still mourn. But we have to make sure that we don't mourn the wrong thing. Because it is possible to mourn the wrong thing. The right thing to mourn, right? We mourn what we're missing. Like when someone passes away, when someone dies, when we lose someone, we mourn our loss, right? We miss them. We get to feel the emptiness. We get to feel the void, the ache of just the space in our lives that they no longer take up. We'll never ever see them again with our eyes. We'll never hear them with our ears. And to feel that void, I believe it honors the fact of their lives. I believe it is right to mourn what we're missing. But I believe it is wrong to mourn what they're missing. Years ago, I came across a pastor who was talking about the fact that whenever he has to do a funeral, or whenever he is at the hospital and someone passes away, or anytime he actually hears about anyone who dies, one of his immediate thoughts is just three words that pass through his mind. These three words pass through his mind every single time he hears that someone has died. And he just stops for a moment and he just thinks to himself, now they know. Every time someone dies, wow, now they know. Just to realize that truth, Jesus has said, have faith in me. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He says, no one comes to the Father except through me. He says, at my Father's house, there are many dwelling places, and I'll come and take you to myself. And every person who has died, especially those who have died in Christ, to be able to just stand in awe of that moment and say this truth, declare this truth, now they know. And this is the last thing. Last fall, when I got the chance to visit with Eli, at one point, he said, if you want, he was smiling, and he said, if you want, you can mention me in one of your homilies, one of your talks, if you want. You don't have to if you want to. And then he even said, I don't need to shout out or anything. He said, but if you think that my story will help people, you can share my story. He said, if you think that people hearing about me could offer them some hope. He just thought that, that people would hear of his life, they'd hear of his sufferings, they'd hear of his illness, and they would hear about how through all of this, he just chose to trust in Jesus. That he chose faith, that he chose joy, and he chose it regardless of the outcome. I didn't have a chance to mention him before March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. Because March 17th is Eli's eternal birthday. March 17th was the day that he died. And his mom, his whole family, their loss is remarkable. His mom had written that she understands just even not that she didn't before, but understands the depth of love that she would have gladly, quickly, easily taken his place if that would have been the case. Because they just all loved him so much. All of them would. At one point, his mom posted on the Caring Bridge after everything happened, after the funeral and everything. She said that she's just declared so much faith. She said, as parents, our most important calling is to lead our children to heaven. I just pause on that and realize, as parents, our most important calling is to lead our children to heaven, in which case Eli's mom and dad won. Like literally, they won. She went on to write, she said, this has always been my prayer, that we would all be reunited there one day. And she said, I firmly believe with everything in me that Eli ran his race beautifully and faithfully. He did everything he could while on earth to get to heaven. Now, I just pray for the grace to follow his example and to live in a way that leads me back to him. She wrote, I used to hear people say, I'm one day closer to being with them in heaven, and I never fully understood it. But now I do. And now he knows. And so you can hear about Eli and his family, and you just absolutely grieve with his family. But my invitation is to not grieve what Eli's lost. You say, but he's only 16. You're like, yes, but he's in heaven. But you say he's only 16, never learned how to drive. Well, yeah, but he's in heaven. We never got to go to college. That's great. But do you think for a moment that he'd rather say, okay, I leave heaven in order to go to college, or I never got a chance to work for 45 years until retire at 65? Like, no, he got heaven. Not later, but now. We do mourn, but he doesn't. He lives in the eternal perspective. We know this, we say this every funeral, we say, for those who have died in Christ, life is changed, not ended. And now he knows. And someday we will too. But now for us, we have to live with an eternal perspective. Now as we live each day, each moment, we get to ask the question, what is this in light of eternity? And now we get to hear Jesus tell us, do not let your hearts be troubled. And now we can. Now we can. Even when faced with our next goodbye.
Loving you alone feels so beautiful, and yet it hurts the most. You became my quiet sunrise, the dream I never dared to say. Every smile you gave so freely took my breath a little away. I held this love like fragile glass, so precious, soft and true. But every beat inside my heart was only reaching out to you. Unspoken love is sweet and painful, like honey mixed with rain. A tender hope I hold so tightly, while it slowly breaks me. Loving you from just one side now leaves my soul in silent blue. 'Cause the deeper that I fall alone, the lonelier I do. I can't blame my heart for choosing someone it could never keep. So I smile through hidden heartache and love you quietly. Unspoken love is sweet and painful, like honey mixed with rain. A tender hope I hold so tightly, while it slowly breaks me. Loving you from just one side now leaves my soul in silent blue. 'Cause the deeper that I fall alone, the lonelier I do. Maybe loving you in silence is the closest I can stay, though it leaves behind a sorrow that may never fade away. Unspoken love is sweet and painful, like honey mixed with rain. A tender hope I hold so tightly, while it slowly breaks me. Loving you from just one side now leaves my soul in silent blue. 'Cause the deeper that I fall alone, the lonelier I do.